pass, because I remember that drama well, and there was so much talk and so much debate leading up to that night. You hear your name called, you had some idea, but it finally happens, and you walk across that stage. What was your confidence level like at that point?
Well, the confidence level was very high. I don't know if it was arrogance or it was confidence. I mean, I was confident in my ability, but I was really naive on what was about to happen and the stress and the talent level. I think I was assuming to be very similar to what I did in college, and it certainly wasn't.
It is such a it's such a different, and so many players talk about the learning curve and how steep it is that you just don't realize that. But when did it dawn on you? What was that sort of welcome to the NFL moment where you thought, okay, this is different?
I think it was the first game. I mean, we won, but I threw 4 interceptions, 2 of which got called back on penalties. But I threw 4 interceptions. I had never even done that in my life. So to do it in your first NFL game, I think it affected my confidence a little bit. People have brought that to my attention, and I've looked at it, but it was probably that moment where I started to go, okay, this is a bit different.
So you're not the first rookie quarterback, obviously, to have a difficult first game. Your career continues, but what was the turning point where things really started to head south?
Well, we talk about it in the story. It shouldn't have been this, but it was for me. I tended to look at things like either success or failure, period, black and white. There was no middle ground, and it was the Kansas City game in week 3. We were 2-0. I had done something that no rookie quarterback had done since John Elway and win his first 2 starts, and we walked into a buzzsaw in Kansas City. Derek Thomas, James Hasty, that defense, Donnie Edwards, and I went 1 for 15 for 4 yards, and we got beat in a rainstorm. And how I decided to behave from that moment on was the deciding factor in whether my career was successful or not.
What would you tell that young kid now if you're standing beside him at the end of that game before all that other stuff happens?
Have at it, kid. This isn't going to last long. It had to happen the way it did because, people ask all the time, what if you done something different, or if you would have went to the Colts instead? I was the problem. I didn't know how to deal with failure. I didn't know how to deal with other teammates and be a good leader of men. So it really didn't matter where I was at, and I wouldn't necessarily go back and change anything other than maybe how I treated people. I would have treated people better.
Amazing the insight we all get over time, and kudos to you. At what point did you know your NFL career was over?
I can look back on it now and go the beginning of the end was the Kansas City game, but I really don't know. I don't have an honest answer for when it was over. I think at that moment I was like, is this it? Is this all? It's over.
So it doesn't end well, and the difficulties begin after your career, and we all know how things unravel. But let's talk about the upswing. What happened then, and what's your message now and the difference you're trying to make?
Well, for me, I thought just because I was a football player that made me better than you, which is a silly concept to think of. It's a game. It's an institution in this country.
And you're not the only one,
right?
To think that way.
So what I needed to understand is that the ideals that I thought what made you a success were money, power, and prestige. And so I followed that. I had all those things. I wasn't wanting in any of that because I was rich, I was powerful, and I was a starting quarterback in the NFL. That made me a success.
When you're doing work now with younger players, I know you've spoken to some of these young quarterbacks, which I want to ask you about because you have a lot of experience in this game. First, your message to some of these young quarterbacks coming into the league now, and then I'll ask you to put your scouting hat on in just a minute. But first, what would you tell them, the Mitchell Trubiskys and the Deshaun Watsons of the world today?
Well, I was lucky enough to actually be at the Combine with that select group of quarterbacks who got to go in the first round this year. And, I didn't want to get in their way. This was the biggest job interview they were going to have. I wanted to be there as a support staff for them, and in particular, I said, just because you're a great football player doesn't mean you're a good person. And if you can build that foundation from the beginning, everything usually will follow suit because of that. And your career may not be long, but you're going to be a good person.
When you look at these young quarterbacks, do you have an opinion on who may be in the best position to succeed, at least initially? Because you know this. It's not always about the talent, but the situation you're drafted into can make all the difference in the world. Which of these quarterbacks is in a good spot?
Completely, like you talked about. If Dak Prescott goes to Cleveland last year, I think we're talking completely different.
Different scenario altogether.
So I think Patrick Mahomes stepped into the best possible position to learn from a veteran quarterback like Alex Smith and then sit with a coach like Andy Reid in a place that's stable, playoff contender. He won't have to play right away. He can learn. And I think he's going to take some time because that air raid offense is difficult. That's a big reach to go for an air raid player who hasn't been successful in this league yet.
What's next for Ryan Leaf? You're still very young. You got a whole lifetime of career ahead of you.
I just want to, continue getting up every morning and be grateful and control what I can control. Whatever happens, it's going to be because I put in the work for it. To do more stuff like this, to be a good father, to be a good husband, and be a better son and brother to my family.
Well, we appreciate it. You're well on your way, and a new baby coming in September. That'll keep you busy. Sleep now, because that's important. I know your story will be told on E60 Sunday morning. Thank you for being with us and for the work you're doing now with these younger athletes. NFL Live continues.